5 conspiracy theories that turned out to be true. Conspiracy theorist. It's become a label used to dismiss, to discredit, to silence. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the conspiracy theorists are right. Sometimes the paranoid whispers turn out to be documented fact. Sometimes the government really is lying. What you're about to discover are not theories. These are verified conspiracies that were once dismissed as paranoid delusions, ridiculed by mainstream media and denied by those in power, until the evidence became undeniable, until classified documents were declassified, until whistleblowers came forward, until the truth could no longer be hidden. These stories should make you angry. They should make you question what else you've been told is impossible. Because if these conspiracies were real, what else might be true? Let's start with a conspiracy so massive, so methodically executed, that it poisoned an entire population for decades. And the government knew the whole time. The tobacco industry conspiracy. For over 50 years, cigarette companies told the world that smoking was safe. Doctors appeared in advertisements recommending specific brands for better health. Pregnant women were told smoking calmed their nerves and wouldn't harm their babies. Athletes endorsed cigarettes as performance enhancers. Tobacco was presented as harmless, even beneficial, but behind closed doors, the tobacco industry knew the truth. They had known since the 1950s that cigarettes caused cancer, heart disease, and addiction. And they deliberately hid that information from the public while spending billions on disinformation campaigns. In the 1990s, when people started claiming the tobacco companies were covering up health risks, they were called conspiracy theorists, anti-business extremists, hysterical fearmongers trying to destroy American industry. Then the documents leaked. Internal memos from tobacco executives explicitly discussing how to suppress research linking smoking to cancer, marketing strategies specifically targeting children to create lifelong addicts, scientific studies funded by tobacco companies that were buried when they showed negative health effects. One memo from a Brown and Williamson executive in 1969 stated, "Doubt is our product, since it is the best means of competing with the body of fact that exists in the mind of the general public. It is also the means of establishing a controversy." They knew smoking killed people, they knew it was addictive, and they spent decades manufacturing doubt, funding fake research, bribing scientists, and lobbying politicians to keep selling a product they knew was lethal. The conspiracy was finally exposed through lawsuits in the 1990s. The Master Settlement Agreement in 1998 forced tobacco companies to pay over $200 billion in damages and release millions of internal documents. Those documents revealed a conspiracy of breathtaking scale and cruelty. Tobacco executives had conspired to deceive the public, manipulate scientific research, target children with advertising, and suppress evidence of harm. They traded human lives for profit, and they did it knowingly, deliberately, and systematically. This wasn't a theory. This was a proven criminal conspiracy, and it killed millions of people. Now let's talk about a conspiracy that sounds so absurd, so dystopian, that even today people struggle to believe it was real. The idea that the US government would conduct deadly experiments on its own citizens without their knowledge or consent. The Tuskegee Syphilis experiment. In 1932, the United States Public Health Service launched a study in Macon County, Alabama. The official purpose was to observe the natural progression of untreated syphilis in African American men. 600 black men were recruited, 399 with syphilis and 201 without. They were told they were receiving free health care from the government for bad blood, a local term for various ailments. They were not told they had syphilis. They were not told they were part of an experiment. And most critically, they were never treated for the disease, even after penicillin became the standard cure in 1947. For 40 years, these men were deliberately left untreated. Researchers watched as syphilis destroyed their bodies. They documented the neurological damage, the cardiovascular deterioration, the slow, agonizing progression toward death. Men went blind. They lost motor function. They developed dementia. Many died. The men's wives contracted syphilis. Their children were born with congenital syphilis, causing deformities and early death. The study didn't just destroy the participants, it destroyed entire families. And the government knew, doctors knew, researchers knew. This wasn't a mistake or negligence, this was deliberate. The men were actively prevented from receiving treatment so that scientists could study what happens when syphilis goes untreated until death. When rumors of the study circulated in the black community during the 1960s, people who spoke about it were dismissed as conspiracy theorists spreading anti-government propaganda. The idea that the US government would knowingly infect and refuse to treat black men with a deadly disease seemed too evil to be true. Then, in 1972, a whistleblower named Peter Buxton leaked the story to the press. The Washington Star and New York Times published exposés that shocked the nation. The experiment was immediately terminated, but the damage was done. A congressional hearing confirmed the conspiracy. The government had knowingly allowed American citizens to suffer and die from a treatable disease for the purpose of medical research. No consent was obtained, no treatment was provided, no ethical oversight existed. In 1997, President Bill Clinton issued a formal apology on behalf of the United States government, but the apology couldn't undo decades of suffering, death, and the deep mistrust of medical institutions that this conspiracy created in the black community. The Tuskegee experiment proved that yes, the government will experiment on its own citizens. Yes, they will lie about it, and yes, they will maintain that conspiracy for decades. From medical experimentation, we moved to mass surveillance, a conspiracy theory that was once dismissed as paranoid fantasy but turned out to be horrifyingly real. NSA, mass surveillance, and PRISM. After September 11th of 2001, rumors began circulating that the US government was secretly monitoring all electronic communications. People claimed the NSA was reading emails, listening to phone calls, tracking internet activity, and building massive databases of information on American citizens without warrants or oversight. These people were called conspiracy theorists. They were told they were paranoid, that the government would never violate the Fourth Amendment on such a massive scale, that such a surveillance program would be impossible to hide. For over a decade, privacy advocates, journalists, and civil liberties organizations warned about government surveillance. They were ignored, ridiculed, and dismissed. Then on June 5th, 2013, everything changed. Edward Snowden, a contractor working for the NSA, released classified documents to journalists Glenn Greenwald and Laura Poitras. The documents revealed a surveillance apparatus far more invasive than even the conspiracy theorists had imagined. The NSA was collecting phone records of millions of Verizon customers, not just metadata, not just suspected terrorists, everyone, every phone call, every text message, every email. The agency had direct access to the servers of major tech companies, including Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, and Yahoo, through a program called PRISM. The government could search through vast databases of emails, photos, videos, and chat logs without individual warrants. They were monitoring internet traffic globally through programs like X-Keyscore. They had tapped undersea fiber optic cables to intercept international communications. They had even infiltrated online gaming communities and virtual worlds like World of Warcraft. The scope was staggering. The NSA was collecting and storing billions of communications daily, not from suspected terrorists, from everyone, American citizens, foreign citizens, allies, enemies, everyone. Government officials had repeatedly lied to Congress and the public about the extent of surveillance. Director of National Intelligence James Clapper had testified under oath that the NSA did not collect data on millions of Americans. That testimony was a lie, and the Snowden documents proved it. The conspiracy theorists had been right all along. Mass surveillance was real. The government was monitoring everyone. The Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable search and seizure had been systematically violated for over a decade. Snowden's revelations sparked global outrage and reform efforts. But the fundamental surveillance infrastructure remains in place. The conspiracy was exposed, but the conspiracy continues. Now we move from surveillance to something even darker. A conspiracy involving the CIA, mind control, and experiments so unethical they sound like science fiction. MK Ultra Mind Control Program. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, stories circulated about the CIA conducting secret experiments on unwitting subjects, using drugs and psychological torture to develop mind control techniques. People claimed the government was dosing citizens with LSD without their knowledge, trying to create programmed assassins, and conducting experiments on prisoners and mental patients. These claims were dismissed as paranoid Cold War hysteria. The idea that the CIA would conduct such unethical experiments on American citizens seemed absurd. Then, in 1975, the Church Committee investigations and subsequent Freedom of Information Act requests revealed that the conspiracy was real. MK-Ultra was a genuine CIA program that ran from 1953 to 1973, involving at least 149 sub-projects conducted at 80 institutions, including universities, hospitals, and pharmaceutical companies. The program's goals were terrifying. Develop techniques to control human behavior, create substances that could be administered covertly to alter personality and behavior, find ways to enhance interrogation and debilitation techniques. Essentially, develop mind control. The methods were horrific. Subjects were given LSD without their knowledge or consent. Some were dosed repeatedly for weeks. CIA operatives ran brothels in San Francisco and New York, where they drugged clients and observed their behavior through two-way mirrors. Mental patients were subjected to electroshock therapy at intensities far beyond normal treatment. Some received shock treatments 30 to 40 times the standard dose. Patients were put in drug-induced comas for weeks while recorded messages played on loop in an attempt to reprogram their minds. Sensory deprivation experiments left subjects in complete darkness and silence for weeks until they experienced psychological breaks. Hypnosis, isolation, verbal and sexual abuse were all used to break down and reprogram subjects. These weren't volunteers. These were mental patients seeking treatment, prisoners, drug addicts, prostitutes, people society considered disposable. The CIA experimented on vulnerable populations who couldn't fight back or seek justice. At least one person died directly from MK-Ultra experiments. Dr. Frank Olson, a CIA scientist, was covertly dosed with LSD during a retreat. Days later, he fell from a hotel window to his death. For decades, his death was ruled a suicide. Only after declassification did evidence emerge, suggesting Olson may have been murdered because he wanted to leave the program. In 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms, sensing that investigations were coming, ordered all MK-Ultra files destroyed. Most were burned. The program was successfully buried until 1977, when a Freedom of Information Act request uncovered 20,000 documents that had been misfiled and escaped destruction. These documents proved the conspiracy was real. The CIA had conducted mind control experiments on American citizens without consent. They had used drugs, torture, and psychological manipulation. They had violated every ethical standard of medical research, and then they had tried to destroy the evidence. Congress held hearings. Victims came forward. The conspiracy was confirmed, but because most records were destroyed, the full scope of MKUltra remains unknown. How many people were experimented on? How many died? What techniques were actually developed? We may never know. The conspiracy theorists who claimed the CIA was conducting mind control experiments were proven right. The only question is how much worse the truth might be than what we know. Finally, we come to a conspiracy that demonstrates how governments can orchestrate massive disinformation campaigns against their own people during wartime. The Gulf of Tonkin incident and the Vietnam War. On August 2nd and August 4th, 1964, the U.S. government claimed that North Vietnamese forces attacked American destroyers in the Gulf of Tonkin. President Lyndon Johnson used these attacks to justify the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which gave him authority to escalate U.S. military involvement in Vietnam without a formal declaration of war. The American public was told that U.S. forces had been unprovoked victims of communist aggression. Anyone who questioned this narrative was accused of being anti-American, a communist sympathizer, or a conspiracy theorist. But some people didn't believe the official story. They pointed out inconsistencies in reports. They questioned why North Vietnam would provoke a military superpower. They suggested the incident might have been exaggerated or even fabricated to justify a war the government wanted. These skeptics were dismissed and vilified. The media largely accepted the government's version of events. Dissent was painted as unpatriotic. Decades later, declassified documents and whistleblower testimony revealed that the conspiracy theorists were right. The Gulf of Tonkin incident was, at best, grossly misrepresented and, at worst, a deliberate lie. The first attack on August 2nd did occur, but it was not unprovoked. U.S. destroyers had been conducting covert intelligence operations in North Vietnamese waters as part of a larger campaign of raids and sabotage. The North Vietnamese response was defensive, not an unprovoked attack. The second attack on August 4th, the one that really drove the push for war, never happened. Sonar operators misidentified weather patterns and mechanical malfunctions as enemy torpedoes. The commander on the scene, Captain John Herrick, sent messages questioning whether any attack had occurred, stating that reports were probably due to overeager sonar operators and freak weather effects. These doubts were suppressed. Johnson and Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara presented the incident to Congress and the public as a clear-cut attack, omitting any conflicting information. In 1995, former Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara admitted in a memoir that the second attack almost certainly did not happen. In 2005, declassified NSA documents confirmed that intelligence was deliberately manipulated to create the impression of an attack that never occurred. The conspiracy was real. The government had lied to justify a war that would kill over 58,000 American soldiers and millions of Vietnamese civilians. The Gulf of Tonkin incident was fabricated or, at minimum, wildly exaggerated to manufacture consent for military escalation. People who questioned the official narrative in 1964 were right. The conspiracy theorists were correct, and tens of thousands died because of the lie. So what does all of this mean? 5 massive conspiracies. 5 times the official narrative was a lie. 5 times conspiracy theorists were vindicated. The tobacco industry conspired to hide cancer risks while addicting generations to a deadly product. The U.S. government conducted medical experiments on black men with syphilis for 40 years without treatment or consent. The NSA built a mass surveillance apparatus that monitors everyone, everywhere, all the time. The CIA developed mind control techniques through illegal experiments on unwitting Americans, and the government fabricated an attack to justify a war that killed millions. These aren't theories, these are documented facts, proven conspiracies. So the next time someone dismisses a claim as a conspiracy theory, remember these stories. Remember that sometimes the people called paranoid are simply paying attention. Remember that institutions with power will lie, cover up, and conspire when it serves their interests. Not every conspiracy theory is true. Most aren't, but some are. And the ones that turn out to be real are often worse than anyone imagined. The question you should ask yourself is this: what are they lying about right now? What will we discover in 20 years when today's classified documents are declassified? What conspiracies are happening at this very moment that will make future generations look back in horror? History has shown us that power conspires, authority lies, and sometimes the conspiracy theorists are the only ones telling the truth. If this video made you question what you've been told, hit that like button and subscribe for more investigations into hidden history and uncomfortable truths. Drop a comment. Which of these conspiracies disturbs you most? And what current conspiracy theory do you think might turn out to be true? Remember, just because something sounds crazy doesn't mean it's not real. These 5 conspiracies prove that truth is often stranger and more disturbing than fiction. Stay skeptical, stay curious, and never stop questioning.